You're watching the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast with Michael Philpott. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. This is the Metaphysical Mentor Podcast. I think this topic is so important right now. Over the last 2 years, how many people have been feeling burnt out? You know, I have been. Even today, I was like, going, man, I'm feeling burnt out. And I'm thinking, oh, thank God Jenn's going to be on the show. And, just to help us through this. And so that being said, Jenn, how are you, my friend?
I am good. I am implementing all of my strategies. Everything that I'm about to share with you is all stuff I live every day. And so I feel good. There have been moments, I have to admit, where I've had to up my game, my burnout prevention game, and implement some of my own strategies. But for the most part, I've been good.
Nice. Yeah. And we're going to talk about all those strategies because I know so many of us have been feeling burnt out and we're just like, we're done. Like we're just like our bodies are shutting down, things like that. So Jenn, how would you describe what a burnout is? Because I know it may be different for everybody, but is there just like basic definition of what burnout really is?
So there is some basic definitions, and my personal body of work likes to merge the idea of burnout, which usually is used to describe a manifestation that comes from your work life. But as we know, we're whole congruent beings. So if we're burnt out or feeling stressed at work, that's really, in my opinion, it manifests, stress in your body manifests in all areas, not just work. So, and it works in the opposite as well. If you're feeling stressed at home and you're feeling burnt out, meaning your stress levels are out of control, then likely you're going to feel that way at work as well. So burnout, in the way the World Health Organization suggests it is a manifestation of extreme stress, a lack of ability to cope emotionally and physically because of your profession, because of being overworked. And often that's because of systemic issues and workplace, lack of workplace support. And all of those things are real, obviously. But I like to approach my work in burnout as more the physical manifestation of burnout. And obviously there's some emotional components and some psychological components, and those need to be addressed as well. But in my personal experience of recovering from burnout, once I address the physical experience of stress, meaning the hormonal experience of stress, everything else seemed to balance out. And of course, that's, I approached my healing from a mind, body, and spirit perspective.
Yeah. And that's one thing I really loved about your book is that correlation between mind, body, and spirit. And you go into very much detail of all the different steps that is necessary. You got to heal the body, but you also got to heal the mind, but also the spirit. And it's always the 3 pillars of health. Like you can't just do one and really kind of get the overall health you want. I mean, sure, it's going to help. But sometimes it just will help you get through the more stress, but you're not really doing anything else to alleviate the stress. You're just you're just adapting to the stress, as they would say. So
Exactly.
how did you really start becoming a burnout specialist? Was it actually through your own work?
So how I stumbled across this work is that I profoundly burnt out in 2011. So I'm a child and youth counselor, and I was a foster parent for 18 years for the Children's Aid Society of Toronto.
Wow.
And I was looking after 4 children that weren't my own. And in addition to that, I had 5 children in my blended family. So I was parenting actively 9 children for a period of about 12 years.
Wow.
So needless to say,
that says it right there.
Exactly. You feel stressed just thinking about it, right? Even I, on the other side of that, because I'm now retired from fostering in 2018. But anyway, enough about me. Basically, I burnt out, and I recovered from that burnout experience. And I had been on sort of a journey toward health and healing. And it wasn't until after I healed that I was like, wait a minute, I'm onto something here. I really need to share this with others. So I actually set out to do a training, a burnout training module. And I thought, okay, this is definitely a book. So I wrote it in a matter of 3 months. I just said, okay, here's what I did. I made it really easy and simple to read. You know, you can read it in I've heard people say I read the book in 4 hours. It's very self-helpy with guides and checklists to make it easy, because the person theoretically would be too stressed to go into any serious details or depth. And so I tried to make it very user-friendly, and I basically just walked the readers through my personal journey of healing my body, my mind, and eventually my spirit.
So what was the first indications that you were burnt out? Was it a physical things where you like, I heard so many different things for people. And again, it's going to be different for everybody. You talked about hormones, like, I know a lot of people, their cortisol levels are, just skyrocket, they have all these problems, aches, pains, rashes, so many different things. So what was kind of the thing that started you off going, yeah, I might need to address this.
Yeah, so you talked about high cortisol levels, and that obviously is a concern. But what really happens in a severe state of burnout is that the cortisol levels start to drop, and then you feel really, really bad. So I basically felt really, really bad. I would wake up in the morning with all of this emotional energy, like, okay, I want to do this and I want to do this. And I'm a super crafty person. I like to cook. I like to clean. I loved being in the service of my family and of the children that I was taking care of. But I would wake up with all this emotional energy only to hit a physical wall. And then that made me feel almost depressed. It made me feel like so exhausted that I wanted to reach for sugar all day. You reach for sugar like donuts and carbs and just all kinds of sugar, because actually we reach for sugar because sugar is very effective in the short term at lowering cortisol levels. So we do that instinctively, and it does work. Unfortunately, it's like adding gasoline to an already roaring fire at that point. And so I was reaching for sugar all the time, and I have a predisposition to type 2 diabetes. I have an uncle with no legs due to diabetic amputation. It's a big deal for me to be reaching for sugar with my genetic makeup is just not a good thing. I was 220 pounds. I had severe adult cystic acne. So my hormones were on all fronts, not just the stress hormones, but also the female hormones and all the other hormones, the sleep hormones, the circadian rhythm, everything within my body was completely out of balance. And a part of that experience is because I wasn't saying no, and all of those things that we know about. When we talk about burnout, it's almost always that we're talking about self-care and setting boundaries and learning to say no. Obviously, I had some issues with those 3 things. But in addition to those 3 things, there were so many other things that I wasn't getting right that added to that fire, that roaring fire, so to speak.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it was so
It's so,
exhaustion.
yeah. I so empathize with you on that, because, I've done that too. And I find myself, when I'm tired, when I've worked crazy hours and I feel burnt out, it's that sugar, it's that comfort sugar thing. And you don't realize that you're doing it. And I was just noticing the other day, because I knew I was getting to the cycle of being burnt out. And I just wanted to, grab some donuts. And I went to my sugary donuts, and I thought, yeah, I'll have a couple of donuts. And you don't realize, like, it kind of got me over that little hump, and then realized I just felt like crap afterwards. It's always
That's right.
those three things. It's like sugar, caffeine, and alcohol. The
Absolutely.
trifecta, right? It's either one or
Yeah.
the other, or a combination of 3, right? And they just seem to go well together. It's like whether you're feeling, uppity and you feel good, you want that glass of wine, that one glass of wine, you don't realize it, how detrimental. I mean, it feels good at the beginning, but then you realize the alcohol itself is hard on the liver, then plus the sugar. And then also the opposite, you need that caffeine, which I'm working on right now. The alcohol, I'm pretty good on right now, but it's the caffeine I'm
Good.
struggling with right now.
So one of the tricks for caffeine that I do is I still have coffee in the morning because, hey, I'm not, I'm not going to go that hardcore. But anyway, so what I do is I mix my beans half decaf and half regular, so that it's just a little bit less of a hit.
That's
It
a
works
great,
for me.
that's a good idea. I really like that. So one of the things I want to talk about, and especially in your book too, as well, because I know a lot of people, I can't even speak today. Maybe I am getting burnt out. Is you talked about the caretaker, and I know because you work with the Children's Aid. Now, were you a counselor at the Children's Aid too, as well, or were you just a foster parent with Children's Aid?
I'm a youth counselor and I was a foster parent.
So you doubled down on it, right? So you
Yeah,
kind of you took your work home with you.
sure,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, I commend you on that. I mean, it's such a
Thank
wonderful
you.
thing to be that. And I've done some volunteer work with the local one, Children's Aid Society here, helping with some fundraisers. So I know it's a great organization. But like you said, it's a very heavy, I guess the emotionally heavy workload. And I can understand the burnout there, just dealing with all the issues that these children have. And plus trying to foster them. Then you said you had a total of 9. So
Yes.
in your book, you talk about being the caretaker, and a lot of people out there who are listening to this are probably in that caretaker syndrome. And you talk about the wounds of the caretaker. Maybe you want to touch on that a bit and what that's all about?
Sure. One of the things that we do as caretakers, especially as caretakers with people who have suffered from trauma, and often, well, I would say, 100% of the time in foster care, because children have been taken away from their family for whatever reason, there's trauma involved. And whenever we add trauma to the mix, and really we could argue that everyone's had trauma on some level, some big T traumas and some little t traumas. And when we're taking care of or counseling or befriending in any way or helping in any way, anyone who's experienced either of those traumas, we can do that from a place of, there's this, one of the things I touch on in the book is that we have this inclination, this natural inclination when someone is, I'll use an analogy of being stuck under a rock. I feel so bad, Michael, that you're stuck under a rock. It must feel terrible under there. And we as helpers tend to feel so empathic about your trauma, big T or little t. And we have this inclination to crawl under that rock with you. Unfortunately, that helps neither you nor I. And that was definitely one of the mistakes that I was making as a helper, as a caretaker, as a caregiver, as a mother, was not really owning my own energetic autonomy, my own emotional autonomy, my own physical autonomy. Often physical, because the kids would, jump on me and physically be in my space. So when we talked in the beginning about, self-care and setting boundaries, that was a part of where I went wrong, and one of the things that led to my eventual profound burnout experience.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, again, it's an energetic thing too, because you're putting so much energy out. The gas tank is empty. You
Exactly.
got nothing left, and
That's right.
and you do that every day. You keep going up, and the body's reserve kind of goes, you know what? We're just going to maybe just add a little something into your daily life to slow you down a bit, and usually that's some form of disease to make you kind of like realize that, hey, you're not paying attention to us. We need to get you. You need to start paying attention to what's going on here.
You need
And
some
it's
energy
usually,
coming in, not just going out, right? Yeah.
yeah, because it's constantly as a caretaker, or as somebody who works in a healing profession too as well. I mean, you're always constantly putting out all the time, right? And you got to. It took
Exactly.
me a long time to develop energetic boundaries, because I understood the idea of being burnt out. You put all your energy basically into your clients. Yeah, you come home and you're exhausted. Well, you should be having that nice balance. So, how would you recommend people just really kind of, if you had one thing right now, what is one strategy they can do right now to kind of work on the recovery?
Gosh, so recovery, it depends in what way you want to approach it. For me, I approached it from the body, the physical manifestation of stress first, and that really worked for me. The reason why that can be hard for some people is because making changes in the physical realm, so of course I'm including diet and reduction of caffeine and sugar and all of those things, and avoiding something like so I'm also a keto diet proponent, and I do teaching all around town about keto, and I really believe in that for weight loss, but I don't believe in that for someone who's burnt out. So one of the things that I teach in my classes is for burnout recovery is that avoiding carbs is a very bad idea if you're in the midst of that fire of burnout. So getting your carbs at just the right amount, which I would say is about 100 grams per day, during the manifestation of burnout, to get those hormones back into balance. So, approaching it from a body perspective, the problem with that is that requires some energy, which you may not have. In other words, it requires energy to change your diet and your lifestyle. So where I like people to start is with a consistent mindfulness practice, because that's a lot easier, and it's you get that immediate feedback and that immediate feeling of calm. But any of the strategies, Michael, that I could talk about today, any one of them approached in a silo is not going to help you.
Okay.
There's a whole load of strategies to bringing the stress response back into balance, and mindfulness is one of them. In other words, taking up a mindfulness practice itself, if you are profoundly burnt out like I was, if you're a little bit teetering, as you were talking, that sometimes you're like, I notice my caffeine is moving up, I'm reaching for donuts a little bit more. Maybe you're starting to just get a little stressed, but it doesn't sound to me like that's a profound burnout experience. So if someone's a little stressed, taking up a consistent mindfulness practice, that's going to prevent for you, and that's definitely going to make you feel less stressed, and it's going to be a real help. But if someone is profoundly burnt out, mindfulness itself, it probably isn't going to do a whole lot.
Okay, so let's talk about the mindfulness practice. So what would that actually entail? For somebody listening to this, maybe go, okay, what is she really talking about? Mindfulness. What is that really about?
Okay, so mindfulness is a practice that can include, but it doesn't have to include, meditation. Meditation is probably the form of mindfulness that most people are familiar with. So closing your eyes and being guided through YouTube. You could just, YouTube a guided meditation, a 5 or 10 minute guided meditation. It will guide you through the beach, and with, birds chirping, and you'll hear the waves of the water, and that person will, the guide on YouTube will guide you through this meditative experience. That's one way to approach mindfulness. There's tons and tons of other ways. In other words, there's non-meditative ways to practice mindfulness. So I would say anything that is challenging you, the person, to channel your awareness in a particular way, that's how I would simplify mindfulness in terms of consistent mindfulness practice. And the reason why that's helpful, the reason why for me mindfulness was really helpful in terms of my burnout experience, is because my thoughts going off on negative loops that I didn't think that I had control over, that was a contributing factor to my burnout.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Yeah, if you could just touch about that, because I know, again, you include that as like negative self-talk. So for a lot of people who are listening to this, what were some of those negative loops? Because we all have them. Sometimes, most times, we're not even aware of them. But what were some of yours that were kind of floating through the mind of your mind?
So, again, one of the things I talk about in when I teach mindfulness is that our brain is just a thinking organ. Just like right now, both of us, Michael, you and I, we both have our another organ that we could talk about is our heart. Our heart right now is beating. Never would our heart beat or suffer from an arrhythmia, and never would we say, oh, I feel so guilty. Why is my heart doing this? And yet our brain, which is simply a thinking organ, does the thing it's supposed to do. It thinks. And it does so based on habitual patterns, and it does so based on our history. It's just an organ. It's just got patterns of thinking. It's looking for patterns, and it is a pattern, organ. And so when a thought pops up, we often think, we often identify with that thought, but never do we identify as a heartbeat, but we'll identify with those thoughts. And so one of the outcomes for me with mindfulness was recognizing that I am so much greater than my thoughts, that my thoughts don't really represent who I am in any way. And so what was your question? I think I've gone off track. I'm sorry. I've gone off into my teaching mode.
But that's
Go
okay.
ahead,
That's
Michael.
great, because that's part of doing this podcast is, the whole idea of the mentorship is to teach and having yourself on here. So like you were just going into your teaching mode, which is great, because this is why I do this, to have people like you on to teach people about this, because so many people are going through this. And it's really about just the negative negative thought process, the loops that we keep playing. I've heard so many times where people say, I'm not worthy, or something wrong with me, or, why would you do that? It's that negative self-talk. That's what I was trying to get at, and how we can maybe prevent that. And I know I'm always a big fan of meditation, always, in my podcast, but in my daily, when I do my readings and stuff like that, it always comes up for people too, because it's such a key thing for people to get into meditation, to quiet that mind, just to go within. It's amazing, not only just the overall effects, but the physiological effects too as well. It's just calming that nervous system down, just slowing it down.
Breath alone.
Yeah, which is so bizarre. When people go, oh, just breathe. And I remember years ago when people go, oh, you just need to breathe, just take deep breaths. And I just look at them and I go, I just want to shut that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it's not enough. It's not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet it really is profound. As a practice, it really is profoundly useful.
Yeah. And it's so simple. Just take a deep breath. And that really itself, it's just kind of back into that present, getting back into your body, which is so profound too as well.
And it's free, which is always nice. For now.
Yes, exactly. So one of the things I know you touched on in your book too as well, which I found really, very fascinating, is you talk about epigenetics. Now, a lot of people out there may not understand epigenetics. I know a little bit about that, through Bruce Lipton and his work on the biology of belief, which is a great read. So if you were looking for a good book to read, that's a good book. But let's talk about epigenetics, because, when I saw that in your list of things, I'm going, wow, she gets into epigenetics. Like this is
just
really
briefly,
cool.
I have to say, just let's not scare people into thinking it's too scientific. Just okay. Yes. So
yeah, but it was very cool, because I love the fact that you went there, and I really appreciate that. So maybe just touch on that just a little bit. We're not going to scare you. It's not going to. It's a really good read. Okay, so, but I think it's really important that if you just kind of get the concepts of that, which are fantastic. So if you just touch on that just briefly, there, Jenn.
The study of epigenetics is so new, but so amazing, because it's essentially, back in the day when I was young and on my first diet, I remember the collective thinking was very much that you are at the mercy of your genes. Your genetic makeup is basically, you have no control over anything. If disease is going to get you, it's going to get you. There's nothing you can do. And the study of epigenetics is telling us, actually, your genes are really only 5% of your disease manifestation or your experience in life. And really 95% of everything that we experience in terms of disease, but also in terms of overall health, has to do with our environment, which is incredible, because that puts it's an empowering thought, an idea proven now in science, that actually the environment is not just what we're eating, but that's a part of it. It's not just what we're breathing, but that's a part of it. But the study of epigenetics is telling us, even our thoughts, that's a part of the environment. So it's not just what we're putting in our mouth, it's what's coming out of our mouth even impacts our cells. So, and of course, Bruce Lipton has done a lot of really fantastic work on that front, and the mind-body connection. And just it's so empowering. Once I really was able to ditch that idea that type 2 diabetes runs in my family. Yes, it's important for me to be aware of that fact, but not to the point where I'm going to throw up my hands and say, well, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do, because
Yeah, and it's interesting if you look back. I always just, when I hear that, it's like it reminds me of my parents when they say, "Oh, that's what I can do," or my relatives. Like, it's that kind of pattern of thinking that goes through the ages. Like, oh well, Aunt so and so has cancer; it's in the family, or so like you said, diabetes is in the family. So guess what? And and you get into that pattern of thinking. It's all the time where and I just think with epigenetics now, you are in better control. I mean, you do have the potential there, but if you live that life according to your relatives and what they do, and they don't, I mean, most of the times they're not going to change their habit. They're still eating sugar. They're still doing all these crazy things. So their potential to manifest that disease is 100 times greater than if somebody like yourself, who takes control of their environment, starts being mindful. I mean, the potential is there, but it's not as high as somebody who's not living the lifestyle like yourself. And
exactly.
I think that's
and
really important.
The mind piece is also a huge part of that, which
Oh
is
yeah,
just fascinating stuff.
yeah. I love all that stuff, and I read those books like religiously. And I'm a big fan of actually Dr. Joe Dispenza too, as well, with his work.
Yes,
And he
same.
talks,
And his story is pretty profound with that epigenetic. Like, he took the epigenetic story all the way to the top, with the refusing to get, and not that I would necessarily say that I'm suggesting this in any way, but he refused to have a life-saving surgery and said, no, I'm gonna meditate my way to the top, and he did.
yeah.
So
And he's teaching everybody to do it too, as well.
I
And with
know.
all the, all the
It's great.
testimonies, I love those testimonials. And I love how, just on his work and stuff like that, but you got to do the work. It's not a magic pill. You got to get in there.
That's so true.
Yeah. You got to go and do you got to do the work.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
which is really important. So why keto for you was so important? I know you talked about it. You do cooking demonstrations about that. What was the profound sense of keto? Why did it work for you? And why do you use it just specifically for weight loss?
Okay. So I want to be clear that, it's my personal opinion. A lot of other people would completely disagree with me, but it is my personal opinion that if someone is experiencing profound burnout, that a keto approach might not be right for them during their burnout recovery. So I'll just get that off my chest again.
A little disclaimer there.
A disclaimer. So now that I'm recovered and my cells are so much stronger, and my adrenal system, the system that is in the body that is responsible for metabolizing stress hormones, my adrenal system is much stronger than it used to be. I can handle stress to greater levels than I was ever able to before. And so I'm able to engage in a ketogenic lifestyle. I do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, because of my predisposition. Remember, only 5% is genes. Everything else is how we deal with our environment. And one of the ways in which I choose to deal with my genetic makeup is to avoid carbohydrates for the most part. And that really works for me. To prevent type 2 diabetes, to prevent obesity, so I've lost 80 pounds and I've kept it off. And I'm though, I don't like to look at my story as a weight loss story per se, more of a transformation, body, mind, and spirit transformation.
But that's a huge transformation. That's like a whole, it's like half a body. Like, that's a lot of weight. Like, if you think about it, if you go to the gym right now and you pick up an 80-pound dumbbell and try to walk around with that for 5, 10, 15 years, that's a lot, Jen.
It really is. And
it is a lot.
I'm very proud. I'm proud because I just recently did the before and after pictures, and I was like, wow, like even I find them pretty, the before and after pictures pretty spectacular. So
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I think that's important. Part of, is your story is very inspirational too, as well, because, not only did you just go through this burnout, I mean, you're doing, like, if you look on the big scope of things, you're doing everything right, and you're helping people out. And people who are at the at the most vulnerable, young kids and things like that. And you're fostering people, you're fostering kids too as well, which is a huge thing, and taking care of your family. And then you finally realize you have nothing less in your tank. And then, you make this big transformational story. And I think that's really important too. It's not only the prevention and how to do it, and your book is good, but the story itself about how you accomplished it too as well, I think, which is really important. I think that's what's going to really, people really drive them to get to your book, because that story in itself, losing the weight, because for a lot of people, that's a hard thing, is their physicality, their how they feel in their body. And when you can do that and you can keep it off consistently and help others, I think that's another win-win.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
why I teach body transformation courses and keto courses throughout the year. It's not a bulk of the work that I do, but it's something that I'm really passionate about, is helping others toward this transformation. And I'll tell you, this amount of it is about what you put in your mouth. Everything is in the mindset. It's the way that you look at things. It's like what we were talking about with our parents' generation of, what are you going to do? Aunt Flo has cancer, and it's in our family. We're destined, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a lot of it is really about that too as well. So we kind of touched on a little bit about the body and kind of worked on the mind. Let's talk about the spirit, because I think that's really important too. So how do we start working with our spirit, and maybe kind of define what you really mean by, mind, body, and spirit?
So the spiritual component, the way that I perceive it, is like the idea that, I was just talking about this last night with my body transformation course people, and the way that I view the spirit. We could talk about God, if that's what you're into. We could talk about it from a religious standpoint, if that makes you feel good. To me, it's just the idea that there's something else outside of, in addition to this dimension, this physical realm, the earthly realm. I think most of us know that it's there. Most of us are in tune with or in touch with it on some level in our own way, maybe in different ways. A Buddhist monk might go into a meditation. A Christian person might sit and pray on the rosary. Someone else might, so we all have these various experiences. But for me, it's just an awareness of another realm outside of this physical one. And the way that I like to look at it is, we're here in this physical reality for a reason. At least that's how I perceive it. So it's not like we want to leave because we kind of do some days. You just want to, let's just, get out of this ship and go to the other realm.
Yeah, that's a polite way of
of
saying it. Yes.
Yeah, we just want to flee, right?
Yeah.
But instead of fleeing, my experience here has been greater and more joyous when I have at least what I call my toe in heaven. In other words, when in every moment, if I can be aware of the other realm, that this isn't everything, that we can see with all of our five senses isn't everything. And that we sense with that sixth sense that there is another realm. If we can even just in any moment have our awareness fixed on that, everything else, it all seems so less stressful.
It almost seems like it's irrelevant in the bigger picture of the scheme of things. It just seems so like it seems like our problems in life are so minuscule,
Sure.
Yeah. And not all the time.
Less for me, that's not my experience. So you're saying it almost feels, so when you have your toe in heaven, it almost feels like this is irrelevant. So I hear that, and I think I've experienced that once or twice. But I think the deeper that I go into that knowing and that surrender, what I experience as surrender, or at least I'm trying, it feels more relevant because I recognize that we all have a purpose here. I don't know what that is, but there is some kind of purpose. And so I almost become rooted more deeply with my toe in heaven, with my awareness always fixated on the other realm, which is, just it's so warm and a wonderful experience. But it's almost like this becomes, so when you said this feels like it's almost irrelevant, I understand what you're saying, because it's so powerful and incredible, that other realm, especially when we tap into it, those few and far between times that I've truly tapped into it. But when I do, it does feel, so I understand that sensation, but I feel like having my toe in heaven has reminded me that this time and space was, for some reason, I'm here, whether I chose it or not. I think I did, whatever, that sensation. But I feel like having my toe in heaven has reminded me that this time and space was, for some reason, I'm here, whether I chose it or not. I think I did, whatever.
There are some days there are some days you probably go, oh, God, did I really choose this? Like, really?
Exactly. So for me, I feel the opposite of that, but I have felt the irrelevance at times. But for me, I just feel so deeply rooted in this time and space when I have my, what I call toe in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like it's like you get like supercharged. You get bring that divine energy into your three. It's like you take it from the beyond and you bring it with you into that. So it just reinforces it. So it gives you like, it's almost like a supercharger for your car. It kind of energizes
Exactly.
and it recharges your body, and it just gives you that little bit of motivation to get through the muck of the thing. And it's very, very profound. It took me a long time to figure that out, but I'm glad I did, because it is I think pretty well, it's saved me. Like, literally, it probably will save my ass, just to do the work and get in there and just realize, okay, things are going to be okay, and take that energy and bring it into this world. And it's like you're supercharged. You're kind of like, okay, I have more energy now. I can get through anything. If I know that I'm connected to that, I can get through anything. And
Yes.
that's like a superpower. So
yeah, because this is all an illusion without that toe in heaven. And then it feels so irrelevant.
Oh, I like
right?
that. Yeah. Yeah. I like that too. Now, one of the things I want to say is, like, I really loved, I saw this quote that you had, and I think it's really important that we kind of look at helpers. And it says, our world needs to place more value on its helpers, on that quote. And I think that's really important. You want to just kind of just touch briefly on that?
That is, if there was, if I had like a magic wand and I could do something,
Let's say you do.
Let's say I do, I would just love for our culture to place more value on its helpers. I was just talking to a friend just today, just like a couple of hours ago, via Zoom, about, and she's been a helper for many years. And she was at some point, she was running this amazing organization that helps children with disabilities. And in Ontario, a couple of years ago, there was a major shift in our political landscape, which is what happens. And of course, the first thing to get cut when we need to save money is helpers, professional helpers, people that have begun their adulthood with the purpose and the calling to help those in need. And it's one of the first things to go. Why? Because we don't place enough value on it. And yet we all feel upset when a teenager goes into a high school and shoots all of his, peers, because he's so stressed, empty, broken. And there are counselors, who can help. We all talk about, Michael, you're local to me, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm just down the road.
Okay. I for a moment I was like, wait a minute, because I speak to people all across the world, and I'm like, wait a minute. So in Ontario, the state of our education is, a little bit of a mess.
You'd say it's crap.
Yeah. So, everyone talks about the teachers, and of course I'm on the side of the teachers, so don't message me. But no one ever talks about the counselors that are inside of all of the schools, helping the children who have major behavioral manifestations, who have diagnosis like autism. No one even talks about the fact that they are way underpaid and way overworked. And so if I had one wish, maybe world peace, but second to that would be the idea that maybe we would place respect, money, resources, care to those people who are working tirelessly in the background of our communities, holding them up.
Yeah, I think that's really an important thing. And even though we're both, living in Ontario, Canada here, I think it's a worldwide problem. We're just not investing in people. We're investing in technology and other things. It's never about the common core of the people. And I think that's really important that we need to do this.
We want to put these blinders on, right? And say, oh, it's not happening. I didn't know there were people in foster care. I didn't know there were homeless people. I don't want to think about it. And I don't want to pay more taxes to help them. Yeah.
The mentality is like, why do I have to pay more for these people? It's that mentality. Well, it's like, screw them, and I'm not going to help them. We get in this mentality, and it's so easy to get into it because, we live in this fear-based society that just keeps us, always got to keep us thinking about ourselves and not other people. And when we can shift that focus from ourselves to others, and we all have that innate ability. We all have that within ourselves. It's just get lost. It gets buried underneath there. And it only happens when you actually need some help. Do you actually kind of look at it like an important way of thinking about it? And I know a lot of your proceeds go to this organization called Stand Up for Kids. You want to talk about that just briefly?
Yes, Stand Up for Kids is an amazing foundation that supports children in care to get opportunities that they would otherwise not get because of the funding that we just talked about. And I personally have had the opportunity for children to access some of those funds for things like, there's various things that they would fund for children, like a new bike. If there's no funding for a new bike for a child, I've had children get a new bike who were really into cycling, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that was so important. That was one of the things. I had a good friend of mine, Tanya. So I'm just going to a little shout out to Tanya. I did some volunteer work. Yeah, so I did some volunteer work with her at the local Children's Aid Society, doing a little bit of mentoring and also just helping with event fundraising too as well. And it's so amazing to see their eyes. And I used to because I also do cooking demonstrations. My background is a chef, so I did that for a living. So
Wow.
I had a lot of samples and products that were sent to me for testing. And I had a lot, and it's like, okay, let's get this stuff away. So I had like boxes and boxes of stuff, and I remember bringing it down to to the ladies down there, and they looked at me and said, "Where are you getting this stuff? Are you stealing this?" I said, "No, this is all my stuff. Like, just bring them, give them to the kids." And because a lot of these kids now, because I know at a certain age they kind of age out, if I remember that's the thing, and
yes,
they have nothing. They have like no cooking tools. They have no nothing. They don't know how to do this. Right. So I was really happy to be able to donate that equipment, cooking utensils and cooking pans and stuff like that. And it was really good. And yeah, I think it's really important. So that being said, Jenn, if people were looking to find your services, they want to find your book, they want, to have you as their coach, maybe an organization or stuff like that, or maybe even better, and want to donate to this wonderful organization, where can they do this?
Okay, so in terms of donating, they would have to look up they could send me an email first of all. It's info@Jenn Bruer, that's JENN Brewer .com. So info@jennbrewer.com. So they could email me and I could put them in touch in terms of a donation, and that would be amazing. I'd be so happy. In terms of services, there's a couple of services that I have. Number one is that I do burnout recovery workshops in corporate environments. That's anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. Most companies are like, oh, we just want to do a 1 hour. A 3 hour will be a much more in-depth. I'll leave you with all the strategies to get back into a state of balance. One is the other thing I train on in corporate environments would be mindfulness. And I'm soon to be diversity trained in 2022. I'm going through training right now. In 2022, I'll be diversity trained. And then the other thing is my keto courses, which I have another one coming up in, it's a support and education group. And that starts in January, just after the holiday. I think it's January 4th. You can check me out on all the socials at Jenn Bruer. And I also do some food coaching sometimes when people hit me up for that.
Okay, fantastic. I'll have all that information in the description below. So you just have to scroll down when you're on Spotify or Apple or even on the YouTube page. Just kind of scroll down a little bit. I'll have Jenn's information there and contact information there, so that you can reach out to her and maybe do a donation. I'm going to really hit you guys on that donation thing. I think it's so cool that if you guys can do that, that would be fantastic. But that being said, Jenn, we're almost out of time.
Yes. Wow, that flew by, didn't it?
It certainly does.
So
yeah.
If we're just around the corner, we have to get together for one of us has to cook for the other.
Well, you know what? I always get it. Sorry, I'm going to say something. I always get into this trap. People say, once I find out thing, I love to cook, but sometimes I enjoy even more when somebody cooks for me, because I always have to be, have to be the one to cook. But yeah, I would definitely, I think that's an excellent idea. And then we can swap stories too, as well, of all the different things, because we have a lot in common.
We sure do.
Yeah, we certainly do. But that being said, Jenn, I'm just going to close off the podcast here. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for
thank you.
Me.
Yeah, so this has been the Metaphysical Mentor podcast with Michael Philpott. Thank you so much for joining me, and goodbye for now.